Greetings and salutations, all you absolutely stunning individuals. It is another rep of League Online. Eric and Mark here with you beauties for a little bit of an all-time countdown. We are looking at the 5 biggest, baddest, most painful anime betrayals of all time in Lolesports history. And that is obviously, we're looking specifically at roster moves where someone tore the heart of their former team, fan base, whoever it is, stabbed them right in the back, made a move that you absolutely never saw coming. And let me tell you, there's quite a few of these to change from over the years.
There's a good handful to pick from when you're talking about these anime betrayal type of moments within League of Legends. I think important thing to remember with all of these that we'll go over today, just like in anime, and you have those betrayals, there's story, there's reason, lore behind why this happens, and that's part of the fun, part of the drama when you're talking about these type of betrayal moments within League of Legends.
And let's start with the freshest in our memory, the most recent. It is the breakup of the ZOFGK, the back-to-back-to-back world finalists. Everyone thought it couldn't be done. We saw Guma, Kyria, Owner re-signing, and you're saying Exodia is forming for a third straight year, and then at the final hour, Zeus signs with Hanwha Life, leaving T1 and their fan bases absolutely stunned that one of these guys wanted to go off on his own and make a name for himself separate of the T1 brand.
Baby, we are talking about Zeus to Hanwha Life, and this is one that I feel could age like a fine wine. It could become one of the best and biggest of these betrayal moments within League of Legends. You have a lot of the stuff there. Of course, the history of Zeus with T1 as the organization. You talked about it. The World Championships, the gameplay, the MVP performances that we've had from him in that T1 uniform. You add in the drama of the contract negotiations, whether it truly was Zeus that wanted to step away from T1, forge a path of his own, or it was simply just a total mismanagement, miscommunication between Zeus, the agency, and then T1 as an organization. At the end of the day, we end up with Zeus on Hanwha Life. We get the journey all the way through spring. They're the LCK Cup champions and the inaugural first stand champions. Zeus already putting the trophy case together for Hanwha Life.
Yeah, and I think absolutely in hindsight, you might see this actually lift Zeus's legacy to be able to win not on that T1 roster, not with the aura that is Faker around him. But I understand the pain here because they were so close, these 5 T1 members, all the behind the scenes. It was all about the power of friendship, and that's one of the main reasons why they were able to dominate internationally so well, their synergy. So the fact that this was like the night before free agency was really kicking off. It was so last minute that all this happened, and then T1's kind of left floundering and ended up picking up Doran because he's one of the few guys available, and that is why I think it rubbed a lot of T1 fans the wrong way. But truthfully, I understand Zeus wanting to step out of that T1 shadow and make a name for himself.
I don't think that there's a lot of people that probably don't understand or wouldn't, be agreeable to why, there'd be reasonings to want to step away from T1, step out of that shadow, do something on your own, take a new challenge, all sorts of things. For Zeus, I think part of the problem is the communication of any of that is really what was lacking around any of these type of news or decisions that came through during this period. And yes, the whole drama around how T1 was able to replace Zeus plays into that. But you're right, the friendship, the real vibes that you had of this young core coming together with Faker on T1, that really was part of that betrayal and part of why this is so significant. And I think you could see that throughout what we had in the LCK spring, of where it really felt like that, those episodes in anime where the guy has left the group that he's been with all this time, and oh no, here's the tournament, and who's the opponent? It's him at the other side, and it's Zeus with Hanwha Life.
Eliminating his former squad way earlier in the tournament than you would have expected, which is obviously a great cliffhanger for what Season 2 of the show will be when T1 gets that rematch against Hanwha. But Some of the drama, I think, overblown because you've seen the interactions with Zeus and his former T1 pals, and it's been all smiles and laughing. Him and Kira even had the same haircut coming into the year. Feel like they went to the same barber. So maybe some of the drama is a little bit overblown, but still, it was an absolute shockwave in that offseason for Zeus heading over to Hanwha. Next one on the list, we're going way back, and this will make both Mark and I feel very old, that this was nearly 10 years ago, and this is a little bit of a double betrayal with Doublelift, and we're talking about number one. The first betrayal here is CLG kicking him from the squad, and we'll never know the full details behind what happened here. Obviously, it was probably related to some toxicity out of CLG, but he was the face of this organization and built their brand up to the heights that it was in 2015. Just won an LCS title, their first LCS title, and then gets kicked the following offseason. That is betrayal.
Yes, and I think the combination of that toxicity, the attitude, and what he had built in that career in the early stages of the LCS for CLG, you think that Doublelift felt he was untouchable to some degree for this team in this situation, how things had built up, where his star power felt
and 2015 esports was a very different time than modern day also.
Yes, and so again, to feel like you are such an integral part, such an important part of why things are trending in this direction for this group, why things are picking up, the hype, the excitement, and to then get the boot out of this situation. Yes, you can understand the drama, the hate, everything that was fueling this type of moment. And then, of course, the success that follows with TSM for Doublelift adds on to it the fire that what was going on. And, of course, the El Clasico rivalry that we had with CLG and TSM playing into part of this anime betrayal.
Yeah, and that is the second part of this is CLG kicks Doublelift. Spartan kicks them out of CLG only to realize as he was falling, he got a knife stab into their back as they see TSM is where Doublelift ends up falling. And again, if you weren't following the scene back then, this was the premier rivalry in the LCS, CLG versus TSM. And this is before there were commonly big off-season moves. So Doublelift, the most famous player alongside Bjergsen at the time, the two of them uniting on the same squad, doing it against the rival of CLG was the second part of this betrayal. And it was Doublelift getting revenge for being done dirty, I'm sure, how he felt.
Yeah, that was exactly how it felt. And you could see that throughout the results, the power for TSM, the emotion of having him join the organization. Hell, they had the, YouTube posting of it, of him, in the trash bin, pulling him out of there. Throw the jersey in. From CLG and everything. So this, yes, has to be one of those iconic moments that you remember throughout League of Legends history, this, era and the establishment of what was the early part of Doublelift's career, Rush Hour alongside Afromove, and then the transition to TSM and all the success that happens afterwards. Yes, this is an iconic anime betrayal within League of Legends, and I think you could even honorable mention it, the betrayal of TSM to Doublelift a couple years later as well. We could throw that in as the extra little cherry on top to the sundae.
I mean, you could probably just do a pure ranking of Doublelift betrayals. I feel like Team Liquid probably did it to him too, saying he was a little bit toxic and throwing him away. Maybe the theme here, the common denominator, is actually Doublelift.
Every once in a while, good to have that self-reflection when you're talking about stuff like that. But yeah, I think this is an important one to have noted here in the history of the anime betrayals in League of Legends.
Next one on the list is where you start getting real. This is when the crazy off-season moves were happening. And in terms of just shock value, this would probably be even higher on a list. But in terms of, again, betrayal, fresh off of back-to-back LEC titles, they just made it to the World Finals and felt like it was the closest Europe has been to actually vying for international titles. Cap says, I can do even one better. He leaves Fnatic to join again. The rivalry wasn't nearly as established as it is now, but they were still two premier European teams. He goes to G2. Perks was already a premier mid laner, just had his best series ever against RNG at Worlds. He goes down to AD carry, but I think Caps leaving the team, the organization that built him into a star to go to the rivals was a shocker.
Yeah, and it was the combo effect of not just the earthquake shattering move that you had with Caps going over to G2, but it's been the after effect, the aftershock of that earthquake that we've been feeling throughout the LEC, throughout the international scene for all these years that have passed. And that has been how Caps has developed, how he has bloomed into that a standout shining star of the LEC in that mid lane. This is really where it all starts. You go back to this move that, after getting to the World Finals with Fnatic and all the hype, baby Faker and everything else was going to be, this was supposed to be the jewel, the gem for Fnatic. And here it is going over to the rival organization within the same region. And not just that, this rival organization, they already had a star player within that position. It changes things up. And I think the extra sweetener for this anime betrayal is then how the rest of the world had to feel going up against what was going on with G2, that creativity that they had within that pocket era of League of Legends. And of course, as we know, looking back on anything after Fearless Draft and how stagnant, how stale a lot of those metas feel, didn't feel that way when you were rolling through with Zoe down in the bottom lane for Perks and whatever you would throw Caps on in the mid lane. This is an iconic move within League of Legends, and it does have the buildings, the feel of an anime betrayal.
And, I think Fnatic fans and the organization felt like they had a Pokemon that they had nurtured, they had leveled up, they had groomed. It finally evolves to its final form, and it's gone before you get to reap the rewards, because 2019 is when Caps was going toe-to-toe, not with people in the LEC, with Faker himself.
This is like in Pokemon when Charmander joins Ash, but this is a situation where you're going, we weren't a bad trainer. We didn't abandon Caps in any of these situations. We lost him.
Propped him up.
Here goes the Charmander. He's a Charizard now over with G2, breathing that flamethrower all over the rest of the LEC. Yes, this has got to be one of those ones that you are remembering throughout the course of history in League of Legends. Where were you type of moment when it all went down? And then where have you been since? As this has been one of the most dominant stories within the LEC since then.
And I mean, it's not an over-exaggeration to say it shifted the very tectonic plates of the LEC, because since this move, Fnatic hasn't won a single title. I can't even keep track of how many Caps has racked up. It's been double digits on G2, and now his time on Fnatic is a distant memory because it's a fraction of the time that he's been on G2 since.
When I say Caps, when you think LEC Caps, when I bring that into your head, what are you picturing? You're picturing the G2 Samurai jersey with Caps. You're thinking of all these moments with Perks that they had in that year where everything was so different and the change that came through. You're not thinking of the fresh baby-faced Caps over with Fnatic at the World Championships. Yes, crazy stories, crazy timeline. And this is one of those ones where, yes, there is the anime betrayal aspect to it, but I think kind of at the end of the day, you have Fnatic chasing the success that Caps has been able to have, but it doesn't need to be this upset, angry story that sometimes we see in anime, because of course you can look at that side with Caps and the success and the hard work that he has put in to develop and have this type of history with G2 since.
Next one on the list wasn't as shocking, groundbreaking a move, but it felt like more of a betrayal, because Peanut was the new star jungler worldwide, not just in the LCK. 2016 on the Rocks Tigers, you see how elite, how exciting a player he was. He got so close to beating the dynasty of SKT at the World Championship, and then you head into the next year. Smeb, his former top laner, we're building a super team to take down SKT. We're bringing in Mata, we're bringing in Deft, we're going together on KT Rolster. We got Pon, the mid lane killer. I know Score was already there, but Peanut says, I'm going to go a different route. I couldn't beat him. I'm gonna join them. Evil Dark Peanut goes to SKT, and I know we have this lasting memory of the World Championship Peanut, but Spring and MSI Peanut was an absolute force and had that momentum from his time on Rocks.
Oh man, it is one of the most vintage performances that I can think of within the game of League of Legends, going back to that Lee Sin at MSI 2017 that you had from Peanut. Truly one of the most oppressive forces that you had in the jungle, and one of the biggest skill gaps that we were seeing at the tournament was from him and what he was able to do. This is a monumental one to talk about, and I think it's the nice stinky cheese amongst this group that you got on this charcuterie board, the way that it's aged throughout this years, because we've had such a long career for Peanut that you can go down this track and you can look back at this time, his time with the Rocks Tigers. Yes, that core group that was so tight, that did pull off so many upsets and did the unthinkable for that group, that you did have those feelings for them. You did have that connection. And that's where that connection is severed as Peanut joins the dynasty, the evil empire of T1, to try and secure himself a world championship. Doesn't end that way. We don't get the Peanut T1 skin that we all wanted to see, all wanted to spend our money on and get. Doesn't happen, but we do get an extra layer to this one, because it continues the time after T1 adds the extra flair and spice to this one.
And you could say it's the redemption arc for Peanut, because maybe he sold his soul to join SKT after getting so close to beating them, but now we come full circle. Maybe he was part of recruiting Zeus from T1 to say, you know what, I've come around now and I'm here to infiltrate. I had an inside man all along.
I've been there. I know what it's like. I know what it's like on the outside, and what you can do and what you can build out with that one. Of course, Peanut had the successful runs so many times with Gen G, as well as an important one to look at. Bouncing back after some time in the LPL and everything else, and then now with Hanwha Life. Yes, this was, though, a very important one, and one of these ones at the early era of League of Legends where people were so attached, so connected with some of these rosters. To have him join the T1 Empire and really go against everything of that friend group with the Rocks Tigers felt like that anime Betrayal moment.
Especially because this was a similar era where Kevin Durant joined the Golden State Warriors, a team that had already won without him. He joins. He's always taking the easy road or the hardest road. But obviously, Peanut's career had a very different trajectory than that, of course. Caps going over to G2, you know, we talked about, you hardly even remember the Fnatic times now because it was 2 years, but the betrayal was so much stronger when Rekkles does the same thing, because it wasn't 2 years that Rekkles was on Fnatic. It was the better part of a decade, 7 years on Fnatic. Most of us expected him to retire there, let alone not going over to the rival. This was now fully a rival. They had played in like 3 straight finals. G2 had just won 4 straight finals, and to see Rekkles go over there when G2 was in the peak of their dynasty, it felt like a stab to the heart to the Fnatic organization. Spoilers, they would stab him back even worse later, but at the time, it felt like true betrayal.
Oh man, I remember this one so fresh because it was coming off the heels of the offseason with Caps going over to G2, making everything happen with perks, and how we didn't. That felt unbelievable at the time. And with that in reference, I was trying to check myself and go, okay, anything's on the table. All cards could happen here with this one, except this. This is the one that is impossible to happen within League of Legends. You go back to that early era as well. Even more so felt strange to have that type of identity, to have that connection with a player and an organization. There were very few that I think you could say got to that type of level as Rekkles and Fnatic did, with being synonymous together and what they would do on Summoner's Rift. It happened. It happened. He joins G2, and not just joins G2, it's the full press. Slap it all together. Let's get him in some Ralph Polo Lauren, whatever. Let's throw him in all the advertising and everything. And then wait a minute, we've got some struggles. Uh-oh.
He became, full-time player, part-time model, and brand ambassador for G2, 100% throughout. And because it's similar to the Peanut one because G2 had been winning everything and competing internationally. It felt like Rekkles coming over, and this was really what the downfall was. The expectations were win or bust, not even just go to Worlds. The expectations were you got to be getting to finals or at least top 4 because that's the expectation for G2. And Rekkles had just had a great year with Fnatic. Fnatic had a good run. They just couldn't beat G2. So it's another classic case of if you can't beat them, join them.
And I think part of those expectations is played into not only just, as you said, from where G2 were established and what they had been doing within the LEC since that point, since adding caps to the roster, and even before that type of thing where they were contending and competing at that top end of the region. Part of it is because of just how unbelievable it was for Rekkles to go from Fnatic to G2. You felt that, okay, well, in order to take an opportunity like this, in order to turn your back on the black and orange of Fnatic, it has to be an opportunity like with G2, where you think it is just a lock and done, seal it up. We're winning the region. We're going to the international events, and we are going to be a threat at these events. Didn't happen. Did not play out like that, as we know throughout history. And of course, an extra level of betrayal throughout Rekkles' career of G2, then, with the contract situation and everything else, ends up back with Fnatic, and then there's even more betrayal from there. Oh, what a tale and twist of drama this one really starts to unfold into.
Yeah, I think the process of Rekkles joining G2, he cursed himself because, he did get backstabbed by G2, gets in contract jail, and then Fnatic doesn't want him after. It's like both teams ended up stabbing him doubly for what he did to Fnatic. It obviously didn't warrant any of that, but man, what a saga those 3-year stretches of offseason was in the LEC, and I imagine many more betrayals will happen in the LoL esports scene. But that is it today for League Unlock. Eric and Mark here with you beauties. Thanks for hanging out, and we will catch you on that flippity flip.